The mansion was a sprawling masterpiece of architecture, a fortress of gilded stone and shimmering glass that sat on a manicured hill overlooking the city of Crestwood. It was a monument to the man who owned it, Elias Thorne, a self-made billionaire with a reputation for being as ruthless in business as he was generous to his chosen few. Inside, the silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that muffled the world outside. The only sound was the faint rustle of silk curtains in a stray breeze, a ghost's sigh in the hallowed halls. The 14-bedroom, 3-story mansion, adorned in gold and priceless art, stood as a testament to perfection, an untouchable palace of a life lived at the pinnacle. But somewhere on the second floor, a tiny sound shattered the stillness, a child's cry. Elias, fresh off an early flight from London, strode through the grand foyer, a hand-stitched leather briefcase in one hand and a small, antique music box in the other. It was a surprise for his 6-year-old daughter, Zoya. His flight had landed hours ahead of schedule, and he had dismissed his driver at the gate, wanting to surprise her. He smiled, the sound of her laughter echoing in his mind as he anticipated her delight. Then, the cry came again, a desperate, heart-wrenching sob that cut through the silence like a knife. It was not a childish tantrum but a sound born of pure, unadulterated fear. His smile vanished. The music box slipped from his fingers, clattering on the marble floor. He moved with a speed that belied his age, his steps silent on the polished stone as he ascended the grand, sweeping staircase. The cry was coming from the second-floor hallway, from a room with a half-open door. He pushed it inward and froze. His daughter, Zoya, was huddled on the edge of her princess-themed bed, her knees pulled tight to her chest. Tears stained her cheeks, and her small body trembled. Standing over her, her posture rigid and menacing, was Eleanor, the head housekeeper. Eleanor, in her pristine white blouse and navy maid's dress, loomed inches from Zoya's terrified face, her expression a mask of cold contempt. "You're an ungrateful little charity case," Eleanor hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "You think because he picked you from a run-down orphanage that you can act like a queen? I have been building this house longer than you've been alive, little girl. I've seen your kind come and go. You don't belong here." Zoya's sobs grew louder, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She shook her head, her hand clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit. "I just wanted to call my daddy," she whimpered. Eleanor's face twisted with rage. "You don't speak unless you're spoken to." She spat, jabbing a sharp finger at the girl's small chest. "Your sad eyes scare me to death. He's not here for you." Elias stood rooted in the doorway, his breath caught in his chest. Neither of them had heard him enter. He watched, a horrified spectator, as Eleanor's vile words rained down on his daughter. Eleanor shifted slightly, her head turning just enough to catch a glimpse of him in the doorway. The blood drained from her face, leaving it a ghostly white. "Mr. Thorne," she gasped, stumbling backward. "Sir, I didn't know you were back so soon." Zoya's tear-filled eyes found his. They widened in an instant, a look of pure relief washing over her face. "Daddy!" she cried, her voice a lifeline in the sea of her fear. She slid off the bed, her small legs a little wobbly, and stumbled into his arms. He swept her up, holding her tightly as her tiny body shook with silent, exhausted sobs. She buried her face in his chest, and he held her, rocking her gently. The room, with its elegant furniture and golden accents, seemed to disappear. There was only Zoya and the crushing weight of what he had just witnessed. He looked at Eleanor, his face a mask of stone. "What was that?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous, a predator's growl. Eleanor stammered, her composure completely shattered. She's been difficult, sir. Screaming and throwing things. I was just trying to calm her down. Zoya clung to his lapel, her small voice a whisper. I wanted to call you, she repeated. Who else is in the house? Elias's gaze was unrelenting. Just me, sir, Eleanor said, her voice barely a squeak. I sent the others home so I could do a deep clean of the second floor. It was a matter of convenient. He cut her off. The silence that followed was chilling. He turned away from Eleanor, pulling Zoya closer, and calmly pressed the button on the wall intercom. Brent, he said, his voice as calm and steady as a still lake. I need you to send another maid to Zoya's room immediately. And tell security that Eleanor is to be escorted off the property. She is no longer employed here. Eleanor's mouth opened in a silent protest, but he didn't look at her again. He simply sat on the bed with Zoya in his arms, stroking her hair and whispering soft, soothing words only she could hear. Later, the staff would whisper about the scene, how Elias Thorne, the man who never showed a hint of emotion, had carried his tear-stained daughter past the golden banisters of the grand staircase, his eyes wet with unshed tears. Eleanor was never seen in the mansion again. The security guard escorted her out without a word, but the look in Elias's eyes had said more than any angry tirade ever could. As the door to the bedroom closed, the full weight of the situation settled over Elias. He had built an empire, a fortress of wealth and power, but he had left his most precious treasure vulnerable within its walls. Zoya sat in his lap, her head resting on his shoulder, her eyes finally closed. She was quiet now, not from peace, but from pure, raw exhaustion. I am so sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with a raw, unfamiliar emotion. I should have been here. I should have seen. She didn't respond, her small fingers still clutching the collar of his shirt. He gently wiped the tear tracks from her face. You don't have to be afraid, sweet girl. Do you hear me? Not ever again. You wouldn't have believed me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You would have sent me away if I told you. Elias's heart twisted. I would never do that. Never, he said, his voice breaking. You are my daughter, Zoya. No matter what. Her lips trembled. She said I didn't belong here. He closed his eyes, fighting back the rage that simmered beneath his calm exterior. You belong here more than anyone. You belong to me because I chose you. Because I love you. The next morning, the mansion felt different. Elias met with every single staff member. He didn't yell or blame, but his message was clear. Anyone who saw or suspected mistreatment and remained silent would be fired immediately. 3 more employees resigned, their apologies hollow. Elias, with the cold efficiency of a man who built an empire, set a new policy in motion. He hired a new team, including 2 full-time nannies and a licensed child psychologist. A woman named Angela, who specialized in trauma-informed care for adopted children, was brought in with glowing recommendations. Most importantly, Elias changed himself. He cancelled his next 2 business trips and blocked out every weekend on his calendar. He was there when Zoya got home from her art classes, holding her hand as they walked through the sprawling gardens. He didn't try to fix everything at once, but he was present, a constant, comforting presence she had never known. Weeks later, Elias was tucking Zoya into bed. The fear in her eyes had begun to fade. She laughed more often now and asked him questions, a sign of her newfound trust. She still whispered to her stuffed rabbit, but now she slept with the light off. He pulled the blanket up to her chin and she looked at him, her eyes soft and trusting. "You're not going to leave again, are you?" she asked quietly. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Not unless you come with me," he said, smiling. "Deal?" She nodded. As he walked toward the door, she spoke again, her voice a small, secure sound in the stillness of the room. "Thank you, Daddy." He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. He didn't turn off the light. Instead, he came back and sat on the edge of the bed. "I will always hear you, Zoya," he whispered. "Even when you are silent." The mansion, with its gold-adorned walls, was still a majestic and beautiful place. But its true value was no longer in its chandeliers or its hand-carved furniture. It was in a father who had finally understood that protection was not just about providing, but about being present. It was in a daughter who, after everything, finally felt she was home.